So the idea of conscious business and conscious leadership is to intentionally design a business that we're going to love working in, that isn't going to be solely dependent on us.
Hi, everyone. It's Kara Goldin from The Kara Goldin Show, and I'm super thrilled to have my next guest here. We have Ryan Blair, who is the founder and CEO of AlterCall, and he is recording from Los Angeles, and we're so thrilled to have him here. I'm actually just read his book. It was an older book, I guess, 2016, but still completely inspiring, called Rock Bottom to Rockstar, in case you happen to be watching this on YouTube as well. Really thrilled. So Ryan is a serial entrepreneur and, as I mentioned, an author, a New York Times bestselling author. Despite growing up in a kind of crazy household, somewhat abusive household, joining a gang. I couldn't believe this as a teenager when I was reading this. Definitely found opportunity out there and didn't allow the walls of society to stop him from being able to go out and achieve what he has. Companies that he has started, like SkyPipeline and Vicious, really incredible. And then the most recent startup, AlterCall, is a coaching program that focuses on conscious leadership. So we'll learn a lot more about that. And more than anything, I just want to hear about Ryan's journey too, as I am such a big proponent of the backstories of so many founders. And I think especially people who are listening to this podcast know that it's not always smooth sailing along the way. And we have to always know that we have to figure out how do we move forward and not be stopped by crap along the way. So welcome, Ryan. Thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the kind words in the introduction. And it's also a privilege to learn from you and to have your respective experience at this table here, because you've done quite a lot as well. So it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to speak to you and your audience for that matter.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So take me back to like the early days of Ryan. So did you always know that you were going to start companies when you grew up? What was life like? I mean, it sounds like it was, not perfect.
Well, it wasn't perfect at all. I was raised in a very traumatic environment. Both my mother and father had a lot of unhealed trauma. And as a result of that, I had to, bear the blunt of, their lives. They were addicted to alcohol and drugs. My father was very violent primarily to my mother, but to me and to my brothers and sisters as well. And so, as a young child, although I'm the youngest of five, I'm the youngest by such an extreme that all my older brothers and siblings had already moved out. And so as a young child, I was forced into survival at a really early age. And I was forced to grow up very early. By about the time I was 13 years old, I had to flee the house. I lived in a turkey shed in a bad neighborhood. And I was forced into a gang-related activity as a result of the neighborhood that I lived in and the affiliations of some of my older siblings. So, it wasn't an environment by design at all. And the way I like to explain it to people is, I came into the world at a very low vibrational energy, just extremely low, very negative, very violent, always afraid for my survival. And my process of evolution has been to raise my vibration, throughout this journey.
That's incredible. So you touched on this. So you were really on your own, had to sort of forced to go and figure stuff out. I think that we've had a few people as guests on our podcasts that have gone on to do incredible things. And I think like the difference between your story and many other people is that you decided that this was your situation, right? And that you had a choice, that you were either going to have a pity party and not do it, or you were going to try and figure out how to get out and make it a better situation. And I think it's awesome what you've been able to accomplish. But one of the things I read is that just during that time when you were so young, you were 13, and you sort of fell into a gang. And I mean, that's just wild that you kind of learned about running a business. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that experience.
Well, a gang is just simply an illegal enterprise. And most people don't understand that it's got a hierarchy, there's leadership. Now, the difficulties that you have to deal with in terms of the organization of a gang are, quite violent, and you're facing constant intimidation, threat of your life. You're worried about getting arrested. You're worried about rival gangs finding out where you live, targeting you and your family. So there's a lot of complications to this form of entrepreneurship that don't exist in legal entrepreneurship that I had to learn about the hard way. But, I was an entrepreneur when I was in that gang. In fact, that's how I got involved in technology. I discovered, this was in the early to mid 90s. So I discovered that there was a big marketplace for stolen computers at that time. And not every household had a computer in the early 90s. And so I got involved in buying stolen computers. I went to a software store called Egghead Software, and I stole every book that I could on computer programming and reformatting and rebuilding computers. And I rebuilt computers and sold them on the streets. And that was how I learned, the fundamentals of computers. And then that would, give me the appropriate training to then enter into the workforce at a pretty early age. So one of the things you said earlier is I see all of my past experience as my advantage in any scenario, not as my disadvantage, because of what I have gone through, and the resilience and the survival skills and the nothing to lose mindset that I adopted as a result of the experiences that I had. I believe that I've been able to, be successful as a result of that, not in spite of that.
That's incredible. So what was your first company kind of getting out of the illegal stuff? I mean, you had sort of done stuff that you sound like, you definitely learned from some of those experiences, but you also decided, okay, we need to get on the up and up now and do business the way that is legal.
Well, fortunately, I didn't like jail. It was the one thing that I wasn't into. I didn't enjoy it in there at all. Some people do, believe it or not. I had plenty of people I was housed with that, ended up spending the rest of their lives in there. And for me, I was like, this is the last place that I want to be. So I had no choice but to reform. And I had a tough judge that told me if I didn't reform, that he was going to send me away to prison, for a long time. And so I took that lesson seriously and made the decision that I was going to reform. And then a mentor came into my life, and I'm very spiritual. And so I believe that this is very serendipitous. That a mentor came into my life, and he needed some help in computers for his real estate firm. It was, a legacy real estate firm that was just advancing into things like email and, and the internet for that matter to, do their real estate business. And so I helped set up that computer operation. It was very small, like 4 or 5 people. Then got a job in a technology firm where I got a job in their engineering group and ended up being promoted into management, running a data center and being a part of software development teams. And this was all at about 20 years old. So I'd already had some pretty significant responsibility, and I wasn't afraid of leadership. I wasn't afraid of leading growing men at 20 years old because I'd done that in gangs. So I had no problem taking charge and leading initiatives at a young age. And so as a result of that, I accelerated pretty quickly as in corporate, in a corporate role. And then I kind of saw how I was involved in every part of the supply chain. They would bring me in to actually develop the product. They'd bring me in to sell the product to the potential clients. And it was a small company of about 80 people. And I saw that I could do pretty much every piece of the supply chain there. And that's when I decided to venture out on my own. And my first company you could tell I had some early gifts for marketing. It was called 24/7 Tech. And the idea of it was, if your network's a wreck, call 24/7 Tech. And yours truly would basically answer the phone and repair people's technology 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was my initial idea, because at that time we faced the blue screen of death like every 10 minutes, it seemed like. And corporate operations were constantly disrupted as a result of computer failure and network failure for that matter. And so that was my first venture.
I feel like you just figured stuff out. You were self-taught, you're obviously smart, and you just went and figured it out. And you also knew how to network with people, right? So you were definitely able to go into companies. They would put you out there to learn. I think that one of the things that I think stops us from actually being able to be successful is that most people work inside lines, right? Like they're told, this is how you have to do things. You have to wear a certain thing. You have to live in a certain neighborhood. You have to do all these things and you have to get an internship, whatever that is along the way. I think instead you just threw yourself in and you thought it's got to be better than where I am today.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you my lack of education was my advantage because I didn't know anything. I didn't know any math or any science or anything when I first started in computer sciences. So I, basically picked and chose what I wanted to learn. And I became obsessed about learning business. This was at the beginning of the dot-com first era. And, I'd read Fortune and Forbes magazine and I'd see about, young prodigies starting businesses and I had a dream at a young age to be a successful entrepreneur. And so I consumed as many books, as many audio tapes at the time. This was prior to YouTube and so forth. And I just, I knew that I had a gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. But I knew that I had the ability to fill that gap. And I spent every minute of the day doing whatever I could to fill that gap. And I still have the same approach to life, today as I did when I was 20 years old.
Do you feel like these companies, so you founded SkyPipeline and Vicious as well, were you always this person who saw problems and just decided, did you test the market before you actually started these companies? Or it feels like you would be that, interested. You just said, this is great. There's going to be lots of people that are interested in this and I'm going to just go for it.
Yeah, my intuition on if I could see myself needing the solution, then I would always just remind myself, if there's one, there's many. And then I would go after solving the problem. Now, in retrospect, that wasn't always the best idea because there's a lot of information that I didn't have in approaching problems that way. And so now when I look at things, I look at it a little bit differently because I have more data through my relative experience that I can, look back on. But early on, I was, at SkyPipeline, for example, it was one of the first pioneers of broadband wireless internet in the California region. And I saw that I wanted broadband and wireless, and I couldn't get it from my local telephone company or cable company at the time. And so I thought there must be lots of people out there, and if I could solve this problem for me, I could likely solve it for many. It was more complicated than that. I had to build a network, and I had to scale and raise venture capital, and I was too ignorant to know how complicated the problem was. I thought, I'll be bigger than AT&T, and then we sold for a humble $25 million because it was much more complicated, and I did not have the leadership and project management and the skills necessary to, build a company that was formidable in the telecom space. And so my venture capitalists, they got impatient with me, and we exited the business at a pretty early age. But I parlayed those skills and experiences into then starting another company that wasn't as capital intensive in the nutraceutical consumer product space, and then scaled that one into $600+ million annual revenue, and then exited that business. And so each time I start a business, I do my best to carry with me the past experience and the lessons learned into the new business. And I'm on multiple iterations now, and the current project that I'm building now, hopefully I'll be able to tell you 5 years from now, about all the learnings I had from the past experiences applied to the present one.
I think it's so interesting hearing your story. Whenever I meet with entrepreneurs and see plans that say, in 3 years, we're going to be, 200 million and we're going to flip it and we're going to, and it's just like, whoa, it's just, would you agree? They take way longer.
Yeah.
You don't even know what the problems are going to be in front of you. And it's great to have the vision, but I think that execution is, I always say ideas are a dime a dozen, but the execution is just, it's so key.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of the transaction. To your point, I was a venture capitalist for a minute, very small. I had a $20 million fund that I invested in, a personal capital and some of my partners' capitals. I invested in various projects. And you're absolutely right. One of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make is, they get playing with their spreadsheets, and next thing you know, they've convinced themselves and others that they're going to be a $100 million company inside, say, 2 or 3 years. And if you do have that that success, it comes with a whole suite of other problems. At Visalis, we went from 9 million in sales to 635 million in sales in 24 months. And you would think that is the dream, and that is the most painful process that I've ever lived through, and I would never, go through that process again, because ultimately that limited the sustainability of the company because of the amount of pain that we went through, through such explosive growth. So, there's a method of building a business that's conscious and sustainable that I'm really keen on now that I wasn't so much for before. Before, I think I was more competitively driven, and now I would say I'm more driven to build sustainably.
You started your newest venture called AlterCall. Can you talk a little bit about that? What gave you the idea, and why did you decide that you wanted to start this?
Well, I took a couple of years off after I went through a personal difficulty when I lost my mother. She fell down a flight of stairs after relapsing from alcoholism. And for 2 years, she was in a coma. And by the grace of God and a lot of prayer, she woke up, and then she was severely handicapped for another 4 years from there. We're literally, for every single day for the total of almost 7 years, I would wonder if today was the last day I would see my mother. I'd wonder if I'd ever be able to talk to her again. I'd wonder a lot of things. And so I had 7 years of trauma and high pressure, and I had a lot of success during those 7 years. I published a couple of books and received some notoriety as a result of some business success. And, I tried to escape reality as best I could through business, and then also through some decadent living that, that took its toll as well. So when my mother passed away, I had what I would call an awakening, and I looked myself in the mirror and realized I was not happy with the person I was being. I have a 12-year-old son that was dealing with difficulties with regard to autism, and I realized that I was not being the father I was capable of being, and that I had to make a dramatic change to my life. So at that point, I started pursuing mindfulness and various healing modalities and going deep to know myself and to do the healing that I had never done. The traumatic upbringing that I had been perfect fuel for status-seeking success, because I wanted to prove to everyone that I was enough, and that in spite of my lack of education or in spite of being poor, that I could be wealthy and successful and smart and all those other things. But when my mother passed away, I would have done anything just to have another minute with her. And I wasted a lot of minutes that I did have with her as a result of the lifestyle that I was living as a burning the candle on both ends entrepreneur. So it was a real dramatic awakening, for the lack, I call it a nuclear explosion. And so I took 2 years and did nothing but heal and just regroup. I resigned from boards. I exited investments. I stepped down as CEO of Visalis. I sold off entities. I just basically pared my lifestyle down. I didn't respond to emails or text messages or anything for 2 years. And during that period of time, I decided that I was going to, reemerge out of the cave and mentor people and just teach them what I had learned. And I didn't realize that, there was a big appetite for that mentorship. So the idea of AlterCall is to help people alter their lives so that they can answer their calling. And we're innovating in technology. We're working in biometrics, and we're doing some things to make our coaching platform more efficient. But it's in nature, or in essence, I should say, it's a conscious coaching platform that's specifically working with entrepreneurs to help them, be able to have the energy and have the mindset and psychology necessary for them to be able to, make the impact that they're called to.
That's incredible. And when did you actually start AlterCall?
I started it right when COVID hit, which was probably not the best idea in retrospect. I thought, okay, I'm ready. I've regrouped. I've rebuilt and reevaluated my entire life and gone back through almost every memory I could find, and came up with some new principles and philosophies, and really connected deeply to some values that I hadn't in the past. And the moment I started the business and started hiring team members, COVID hit, and pretty much everything shut down. So I got to go through that adversity, but I was able to lean heavily on the adversity that I went through in 2008 when the recession hit, and I just sold my business to a publicly traded company, and I had to weather that very difficult environment. So I was well equipped to get through COVID. And so I started it 2 years ago, pretty much to the day, right when COVID hit and we all went on lockdown. And basically I had been 2 years living pretty much in isolation And then I went back into isolation for 2 years. But this time around, I'm blessed to have a house with multiple stories. And so I set up some offices at the bottom stories, and I could basically work, at my home during COVID and build the foundation of the entity. Although I really couldn't do much customer acquisition during those times, I could work on some foundational things.
That's awesome. What do you think is the thing that most people get wrong about healing that you've seen just as you are talking to people? I mean, what's kind of the key thing that you're seeing?
Well, one, you are never healed. You're always healing. Because if you're growing, and if you're an entrepreneur and you're growing, you're going to be tearing muscle, basically. And the more you grow, the more muscle you tear, and the more that you have to heal. And so you're constantly in this pattern of growing and healing. And, so what I did is I looked at the process of healing and said, okay, I want to figure out that piece, because I figured out growth, but not healing. And so I would grow, and then I would, sabotage my growth, or I'd fall back, or, I'd grow in a miserable fashion and not in a, focused, concentrated fashion. And so I developed methodologies and practices that basically enable both healing and growth simultaneously. And by healing, you have to heal your belief system. You have to heal your mindset. You have to heal your psychology. You have to heal relationships. You have to heal all the time in order for you to step into an entrepreneur that has the capacity to run a large scale business. And that's oftentimes why many founders, they age out of their businesses, because they haven't grown and healed to the level of the business that they built. And so sometimes founders are very good at building businesses early on, and then they got to go because, they're no longer at a place where they're able to, continue to lead and build the business on a go-forward basis. And so, most people get that wrong. They think they're already healed, or they don't want to look at the things that they have to heal. And the method of healing that I've gone through is one where you look deeply at the shadow. You look deeply at the things that need to be healed. And every single day you're doing the work to heal those things.
So talk to me about the 7 qualities of conscious team members.
Well, there's a number of, I hope I'll get them all right for you. But one, you're going to have purpose. So that would be one of the most important qualities, that you're going to be purpose and mission driven. 2, you're going to, be excellence focused. You're going to have a level of impeccability. You're going to negotiate, consciously, because you're always negotiating for resources when you're a part of a team. You're going to coordinate and collaborate consciously as well. I think I did mention already purpose. There's a couple more. I can't really think of them right now, but in general, the qualities that a conscious person has are really around their growth and their mindset to constantly want to elevate the environment that they're in and continue to raise their performance and raise the performance of the whole, and hold each other accountable to being at their higher selves at all times. And so I'm in the middle of an experimentation of building a conscious team right now on AlterCall, and I only have about 20 team members, but this is a new experimentation of entrepreneurship that I'm venturing into now.
I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is culture too, right? For companies. Yeah. I mean, it's really, and so it's not just, I think that the more research I did on AlterCall, I think it's not just about the founder and about the CEO and about leadership. I really think it's about culture, right? I would think that heads of HR would be, and even to some extent, heads of culture or whoever is handling kind of what the feel of the organization. Because I think like part of, and I'm sure you went through this at your company with such huge growth, but I think part of what's really, really tough is as you're bringing in people and growing your team, people are not necessarily coming for the purpose, right? You can start and you can start a great idea and have, and I think the more successful you are on the sales side, the more pull you have to get great talent in the door, but they don't necessarily care about the vision and the purpose. And I think it's really, really tough. Do you have any suggestions for people as they're growing their teams?
Well, you have to be very intentional in who you're seeking to attract. And although we have process when we're recruiting and running through HR, we want to make sure that that process eliminates people that are not purpose driven. You want to find people that really have a deep innate desire to make an impact in the world, and that they see that their opportunity and their affiliation with your company as a way for them to fulfill that purpose and that impact. So you have to be intentional. You have to recruit people that show signs of that nature. And you have to be very careful. One of the things that I've mentored many entrepreneurs, because that's the primary people that I serve are entrepreneurs, is we can easily design a business that we hate, and we can do that unconsciously. So the idea of conscious business and conscious leadership is to intentionally design a business that we're going to love working in, that isn't going to be solely dependent on us, that is going to be collaborative, and the members within the company are going to be nurturers of the culture, as opposed to us having to be there every step of the way for every meeting and every project. We want to build a business that is going to do great work even in our absence. And many entrepreneurs never get to that level. They tend to have a challenge doing that. So I would agree with you 100%. It's about culture, and it's about creating a culture that's conscious, because it is so easy to have unconscious behaviors rule the culture. And unconscious behaviors might be scarcity, for example, is an unconscious mindset and behavior that rules cultures. Status seeking, people that are politicking, and there's a lot of behaviors in the culture that if you don't have a conscious approach to it will emerge. And part of developing cultures is to recognize those behaviors that are in alignment with your values and in alignment with your cultural mandate, and to correct those behaviors that are not in alignment with those, and get people out as fast as you possibly can that bring behaviors to the table that are going to affect the energy of the entire culture. And that's a mistake that I've made so many times is, I've hired because I wanted to make a plan. I wanted to hit revenue numbers, and I hired because my board told me you got to get these hires done. And I didn't hire, specifically and intentionally around culture, around values, and hire people that I would want to spend a lot of time with outside of the office. And so there's a lot of work that I've done in culture building, and a lot of mentors that I've had in business that have run very large companies that I've learned, about that with. And what I'm building at AlterCall is an experiment, as I mentioned, of a new way of doing business, particularly around coaching and around a coaching platform for entrepreneurs that embodies those virtues that I just shared with you.
It seems a lot easier to grow an organization as you're describing it. What if you have an organization that you're leading and it's broken, right? And you've got these problems, and it's not just one problem. It's, here, right? And yet it's high. When it's high performing, it's even tougher, right? Yeah. It's I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And, it's easy for me to say, well, let him go and get rid of him, right? But then it's like, oh no, but he does a lot, so we can't do that. And it's just it's putting the Band-Aid on, and I think it's a constant problem and dilemma.
Well, that's where leadership comes in. You want divas in your corporation. You want people that really believe in themselves, that are high performers, and you don't want to manage them out, because then you'll get mediocrity. But if you do have a person that is poisoning the culture, that is breaching integrity in their way of doing business, then even at the risk of losing their productivity or their production, you have to either have them take corrective action, or you have to get them out. And that's just the nature of it, knowing that you will attract a talented person that is both productive and matches the values of the corporation. And so we as entrepreneurs cannot operate from scarcity. We can't believe that, by removing this one person, that there won't be 5 other people that are highly qualified and capable of fulfilling their role. If we leave that person in the position, they are more damaging than if we remove them. Yes, we might take a short-term hit. And I've had this same, conversation about, these types of employee matters and HR matters. And I'll tell you where I have failed the most is when I've kept the person in for their production at the expense of the team's collective consciousness. And it always comes back to haunt you, and you always pay a large price for it. If not now, you pay it later.
Definitely. And what about investors? You've got investors that are sort of not dancing in the same direction. I mean, how do you deal with that? You've built a lot of companies, and you've got an entrepreneur that is coming to you and feeling, that there's problems everywhere. What do you do?
Well, you have to become good at negotiating conflict, and you have to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, how can I approach this situation, coming with an intention of learning and understanding and seeking to find, a way to resolve whatever conflict is in the system. When we don't resolve conflict, whether it be with our investors or our team members, is when, the challenges, pile up. And the process of healing is I have to heal these relationships. So if let's say I've miscommunicated to an investor, which I have many times in my life, I have to go out there and explain to the investor that I've miscommunicated and find common ground and agree to some form of a go forward plan for us to have solid communication on a go forward basis. And it's a constant work in progress. Entrepreneurs are about solving problems in the marketplace, right? And in order to solve those problems in the marketplace, we have to get very good at solving internal problems, because the way we solve the external problem is we solve the internal problem. And so I used to, dread a day filled with 25 internal problems. And now my mindset is, this is the work. Because when I solve the internal problems, then the external problems are going to be solved in a beautiful way. But if I'm neglecting the internal problems and I'm letting these internal problems pile up, then I'm never going to solve the external problem in a meaningful way.
So what is the number one thing when people are coming to you with AlterCall? What problem do they see that they want help with?
Generally, I deal with a lot of clients that, they haven't figured out the cultural side of it. They're entrepreneurs that, maybe they have a $30 million business or a $50 million business, and they want to grow beyond that. And they've relied too much upon themselves. And so now they might have a little bit of money in their pocket and they're contemplating the meaning of life. Like, do I want to continue doing this? Do I want to sell the business? And I've helped a few turnarounds because, Visalis was a turnaround. And I've helped a few turnarounds, where an entrepreneur came back in and re-architected their business and created more meaning and more purpose around it, and created it in such a way where they could enjoy their self-love time, their adventure, their travel, and still have a business that's growing and operating, in a way that, that serves them, as opposed to, a business that is basically controlling them and sucking the life out of them. I've helped them redesign the culture of their business to energize them and bring more life to them. And so that's my favorite client to work with. I just helped a young entrepreneur sell his business in a $75 million transaction the other day. And now I'm helping him think about his life as a philanthropist and think about what he's going to be doing next. He's only 30 years old. And, now we're, talking to him about, having him start his own conscious experiment in a new category that he's interested in participating in. So, those are my favorite businesses. But I've dealt with businesses that, are at all levels on the spectrum. I just love solving problems. And if I can work with a willing participant that, that is open to change, that wants to grow and is willing to, to simultaneously heal and grow, then, I'm on board to help them grow as much as I possibly can.
That's awesome. Well, I love your commitment to helping, because I really do believe that there's room for companies, services that are actually have that mindfulness to them. As you know, I founded Hint, and I didn't do it to start a beverage company. I did it because I really saw this problem, and I thought I could help a lot of people get healthy just by enjoying water. And definitely we've done that with that brand. But I'd love to hear a story about a challenge or maybe a failure along the way that, you really hit a wall. It seems like you've solved a lot of problems along the way, but you hit a wall. And what did you learn from those experiences that you can share with us?
I'll tell you that I've hit more walls than I can imagine. I've hit a lot of walls. I've had the privilege of having about $2 billion roll through my hands as an entrepreneur. So I've deployed that money in many different ways. Some of it went to return to investors. Some of it went to acquisitions and a variety of different experimentation. So I've had a lot of failures in order to have the success that I have had. I can give you stories about PR crisis. I can give you stories about canceling an IPO. I had one time where we got an ingredient wrong in a consumer product, and it cost us $25 million in cash. And I learned all about supply chain as a result of that, like literally lighting a fire on $25 million in cash, right? And being raised poor, that's a pretty traumatic experience to think about. Like, I just set fire to 25 million. And, and in order to grow at the speed that I grew at and to scale, to the extent that I did, we broke a lot of stuff and made a lot of mistakes. So there's been tons of it. What I chalk it up all to now is, I have learned to embrace everything as an entrepreneur as an experiment to me. I'm no longer emotionally attached. I attempt to do my very best in every experiment, and I can't say I'm not 100% emotionally attached, but I have the ability to detach emotionally and to look at the results objectively. And when I do fail, I get over it pretty quick. It's a situation where I'll stomach it, I'll contemplate, examine it, think through it, and then I'll move very quickly and let it go. And I do this every single day. I used to accumulate the burden. And then over a period of time, I had such negativity over certain subjects that I didn't even want to look at them anymore because, I didn't develop a process for clearing the heaviness around failed endeavors and projects and relationships and so forth. And so now I do it as a daily process. I examine the prior day. I look at what I learned. What do I want to let go of? And then I move into the next day with a fresh set of eyes and a high level of positivity, knowing that I'm going to embrace whatever challenge comes my way during that day. And the next day I'm going to clear it and move on to the next set of challenges.
That's such great advice. I love that. And I practice something really, really similar. So you were speaking music to me for sure. Well, thank you, Ryan, so much. Where do people find out more about AlterCall and get more information about you as well?
You can go to altercall.com. It's ALTERCALL.com. Or you can catch me on Instagram. I'm at Real Ryan Blair. And if you DM me, I'd be happy to engage with you. And I love talking with entrepreneurs and learning about different ideas that are out there and ways that I can serve.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to The Kara Goldin Show so you're sure not to miss incredible guests like Ryan, where you can hear not only about his business, but about his journey and all the fun elements along the way and lessons learned. And definitely send in those 5-star ratings. The algorithm definitely picks up on those 5-star ratings. So we would really appreciate it if you would take the time to do that. And I can be found on all platforms at Kara Goldin. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book or downloaded it on Audible, please do. It's called Undaunted. And that's my story of my life and also building Hint. And we're here every Monday, Wednesday. We're actually adding Friday now. Super, super exciting. So hopefully everybody will continue listening and have an excellent rest of the week. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.